Where the dust remembers. Where the dust remembers. An Untold Memories original story. Harlan County, Kentucky, 1948 to 1971. Part 1. The Color of Coal. 1948. There are places in America that history forgot to name. Not because nothing happened there, but because the people who lived and died in those places never had anyone willing to write it down. Harlan County, Kentucky, 1948. A stretch of earth pulled out of the Appalachian range, pretty, but only because broken places sometimes are. Hills thick with green, near black when snow comes. Water running red like old metal left outside too long. In November, the clouds hang down, close enough to grab, maybe rip apart if you tried hard enough. The coal mines ran through those mountains like dark veins through a sick body. Those who ran the machines, much like the black rock they mined, dragged out of soil, set alight, worn down, left behind. But this story is not only about the men. It is about a girl named Elara May Combs. That summer, 1948, she turned 17. Not tall, barely making noise when she moved. Eyes deep like they'd seen more than the dim rooms allowed. Ruth, her mother, never made it past the birth, same as the baby boy meant to follow. Silence settled early, then stayed, filling corners where voices should have been. Dale Combs, her father, kept her close but distant, shaping days around duty instead of warmth. He showed care through absence of words, pushing her to bend whenever pressure came. She learned stillness before speech, fitting herself into spaces built for someone else. In Harlan County in 1948, a girl had a narrow set of choices. Marriage came early. Meals warmed on stoves while hands cracked eggs into bowls. Babies arrived one after another, their cries stitching years together. Wrinkles settled long before they should have. Luck meant a husband whose fists stayed open. Elara had watched enough of her neighbors to know that luck was a rare currency in these hills. It wasn't like she spent nights imagining escape. From a young age, she'd figured out one truth: wishes burned through what little you had. But then came the summer of 1948. And with it came James. James Calloway was not from Harlan County. That summer came slow, but he showed up near the end of June anyway, behind the wheel of a rig hauling goods from some warehouse in Lexington. At 22, built thick through the shoulders, there was a mark just above his left eye, left over from a brawl he kept sealed tight in silence. His laughter cracked out loud when least expected, like thunder splitting open a cloudless sky. He was white. Elara was white. In 1948 Harlan County, this should have made things simple. It did not. James Calloway never hid the fact his mother was part Cherokee, something that caused particular folks around those parts to stare harder, mouths tight. It mattered too that Elara's father, Dale Combs, had a sibling serving on the county council. This man carried within him a quiet terror, convinced down to his bones that society worked best when everyone stayed fixed in their appointed place. In Dale Combs' brother's eyes, James Calloway stood far from where he belonged. Though meant for one place, he ended up somewhere else entirely. Where others saw order, that family-spotted mismatch, life had shifted him like a stone kicked off path. Not by choice, yet clearly out of step. To them, his presence felt tilted, unbalanced, as if gravity pulled him wrong. But Elara did not know any of this on the evening she first saw James. She only knew that he was standing at the edge of her father's property, hat in his hand, asking if he could have water for his truck's radiator. She only knew that when he looked at her, really looked at her, the way so few people ever had, she felt something unlock in her chest that she hadn't known was locked. "You live here long?" he asked, while she worked the pump handle. "All my life," she said. "Doesn't that get lonely?" She looked at him. Nobody had ever asked her that before. She spoke a single word. Yes, that was all. One syllable, nothing more. And somehow, in the saying of it, she felt less alone than she had in 17 years. They did not have the luxury of a slow romance. Out in towns, sure. Some kids could take forever getting close, hanging around cafes, chatting on phones, staying late on outdoor seats. Yet down in Harlan County come 1948, days didn't stretch that way. Every fortnight, James came by with his deliveries. Watching tight, Elara's dad acted like someone guarding a locked box. It was time they took without asking. Just 15 minutes, hidden behind the feed store. Walking by the creek early Sunday, when her dad still lay passed out from Saturday's drinking. Messages tucked into a crack under a wobbly rock near the post office wall. Midnight folded around her as Elara held those pages close, drawing breath through ink-stained words. Not once did James craft a perfect line. Punctuation wandered loose, vowels often lost, yet each letter found its way beneath her skin. Quiet moments like these belonged only to paper and pulse. Something raw lived between the lines, uneven but true, pulling her back again. Something might change, he wrote one day. Whatever comes next, my hope is you're there. Never told a soul that before. Not sure if it means much to you. Still, it's all I've got. It was worth everything to her. By September, she was certain she loved him. By October, she was certain she was in trouble. She told James on a cold Tuesday morning, her breath making small clouds in the autumn air. He was silent for a long time. Not the silence of a man running. The silence of a man calculating how much courage he had, and whether it was enough. "We'll get married," he said finally. "My father." "I'll speak to your father." "James," she gripped his arm, "you don't understand what my father's family is like, what his brother is like." Her eyes met his, this gaze, calm, sure, always holding its ground, the kind she'd grown fond of without even realizing why. "I understand enough," he said. "Do you want to marry me, Elara?" Her eyes filled. "Yes," she whispered. "Then that's the only thing that matters." He was wrong about that. But she did not know it yet. And maybe, in that cold October morning, with her hand in his, and the mountains rising around them like old witnesses, maybe it was better that she didn't. Part 2. The Weight of Other Men's Laws. 1948 to 1952. Dale Combs did not speak for 3 full minutes when James came to his door. He simply stood in the doorway of his house and looked at the young man on his porch the way a man looks at something he is deciding whether to destroy. Then he stepped aside and let him in. Over by the kitchen table, they took their seats. Sent away to her room, that is where Elara went. Pressed against the floor she stayed, ear tight to the wall's weak surface, catching each word. Hearing every sound came easily then. Out there, James talked straight, no frills. A job already lined up, future plans taking shape. Maybe Lexington first. Though Cincinnati could happen, his heart stayed fixed on Elara. Looking after her wasn't a maybe. It was set. Her father listened without a word. When James finished, Dale Combs said only this: "My brother's going to hear about this." "I expect he will," James said. You know what my brother is. I know what he is. Silence. You are foolish, Dale remarked. Yet a shift slipped into his words, not quite admiration. More like noticing, as though suddenly spotting a willfulness similar to his. Her arrival is expected in April? Yes, sir. Another silence. You'll marry before Christmas, Dale said, quietly. And then you'll take her away from here, far enough that my brother's arm doesn't reach. James nodded. And if you ever leave her, Dale Combs said, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper, I will find you, and what mine didn't take from me, I will use to end you. I won't, Leah. Be her, James said. He meant it. That was the tragedy of it. He meant every word. They married on December 12th, 1948, in a small Baptist church 3 counties away. 6 folks stood there, not counting shadows. The minister first, stiff-backed, hands folded like he'd rehearsed. Then 2 strangers who blinked too much, the ones the minister brought along. Elara came next, wrapped in borrowed cloth, that soft blue fabric slipping off one shoulder. It wasn't made for her frame. James followed, wearing the single suit he owned, sleeves just short enough to show worn cuffs. Quiet filled the space between them. Just silence where petals might have fallen. A room without tunes hanging in the air. Nothing marked the moment at all. Her fingers curled around his, standing there beneath the arch. Enough, more than she'd let herself hope for, once upon a time. A fresh start came in a quiet place near Cincinnati, Ohio. Work showed up for James at a factory job. The pay beat coal mining, yet cost more in ways hard to name. Shifts stretched too far, while the boss talked like anger made flesh. April of 1949 brought their baby boy into the world. This child they called Thomas. 3 years passed. Not quite joy, yet near enough. Real warmth filled those days. Belonging shaped each moment. Love turned out different for Elara than those worn paperbacks from the library suggested. Not shining, not grand, just steady. James arrived each evening, fingers stained with oil, saying nothing while taking his seat at the table. She figured out how to turn $1 into enough food for nearly a week. Then there was Thomas, laughing like both of them somehow, sharp like James, bright like her, filling their cramped rooms with something bigger. But Harlan County had not forgotten them. And Harlan County did not forgive. The letter came in the spring of 1952. Out of nowhere, a note arrived. Dale Combs had sent it. Not typed, but scratched down in that tight, neat script he always used. Just 3 sentences squeezed together on the page. Out there, my brother already tracks your location. Friends of his wait in Cincinnati. Head deeper, take the kid along. Silence is better now. Skip the reply. Returning isn't an option either. Elara, my heart leans toward you. Always, you've been the light that stays. Staring out the kitchen window, Elara unfolded the letter. Above the row of houses, the sky sat low, pale, empty, without shape. She did not cry. Years taught her some sorrow doesn't show. It settles where crying can't reach it. Pressure behind the ribs, arms like stone, slow bones at sunrise even after long rest. Under the loose plank, the tin waited. She tucked the note inside after folding it slow. Papers they'd saved went there, kept dry, out of sight. The lid closed with a soft click. When James came home that evening, she handed him the letter without a word. Again he looked at it. This time, his eyes moved slower across the words. Then he sat down at the kitchen table and put his head in his hands. 3 years had passed since Thomas arrived. In a room nearby, sleep held him quiet. Through the thin wall came the sound of steady breaths, soft and slow. "Where do we go?" Elara asked. James lifted his head. "West," he said. "As far west as we can afford." Part 3. The Long Road and the Longer Silence. 1952 to 1961. They went to New Mexico. A dusty stretch of land held what people called Cimarron, Spanish for untamed, but nothing fierce remained by 1952. Quiet filled the air now. Fewer than 1,000 lived here. Along its central road stood places you'd expect. Somewhere to eat, a shop for tools, a house of prayer, rooms where children learned. It was the kind of town that asked few questions, because few questions meant fewer complications. They arrived with Thomas and 2 suitcases and $47. Out past the edge of town, James took a job on a ranch, hard labor under open sky, the sort that wore you down day by day without tricks. Hargrove ran the place, a quiet man with little interest in talk. Focused instead on effort, not history. Pay came regularly. Questions did not. James could work. Elara found, to her surprise, that she could too. Out of nowhere, stitching became part of her routine, fixing hems, mending old clothes, sometimes piecing together a full garment from raw fabric. After that came housework, scrubbing floors and wiping windows for those with bigger homes down Main Street. By 54, she stepped into the school building each morning, helping children learn their letters and numbers on folded desks, staying put in that role longer than anyone. Expected after folks assumed she'd just raise kids and tend animals like the others before her. Quiet moments shaped her best lessons. Patience came not from training, but from memory. Memories of being ignored, rushed, dismissed. Those kids in the back row? She noticed them first. Their silence spoke louder than shouts. A shift in seating said more than words ever could. Closer, always closer. She pulled her chair near. Thomas grew. That kid never laughed much, always observing. Built like his dad early on, wide at the shoulders even as a boy of 10, yet those eyes came from his mother, deep and sharp beyond years. Friendships started slowly with him. Once earned, they were held tight. A quiet loyalty ran beneath everything. For 9 years, Cimarron was home. Life never turned out smooth. Still, James would drink. Nothing wild. Yet Elara always noticed when the glass half emptied across days. Ranch chores slowly weighed heavier on his shoulders, while she found peace in the quiet stretch of sand and sky. He'd feel it settle over him, slow and thick, almost like dirt falling into place above a coffin. There were nights when she woke at 2 a.m. and found his side of the bed empty, and found him sitting on the back step in the dark, looking at the stars with an expression she could not read. By his side she'd settle. Questions stayed unspoken. Now and then, words came out of his mouth. Other times, silence filled the space instead. Either way, she stayed. Love showed up quietly, not in fireworks but in minutes. She saw it now, how presence mattered more than passion. Sticking around became the truth of it, slowly making sense. But even in Cimarron, the world was not still. Peace painted the 1950s on American TV screens, but real life refused to match. Behind those glowing boxes sat a different truth. Comfort skipped entire neighborhoods without apology. Whose calm was it, really? The lens never lingered long enough to show. Down dusty lanes in the southwest, power lines ran long before newcomers showed up. Some kinships stretched way back, bloodlines older than maps, older than flags planted on stolen ground. Others moved in lately, claiming space like they'd shaped the canyons themselves. Time meant little to them. History bent to fit their story instead. Thomas Calloway, at school in Cimarron, learned this lesson the way most children learn the hard lessons, through experience. He was 12 years old when a boy named Douglas Pratt, whose father sat on the school board, whose grandfather had been mayor, told Thomas, in the schoolyard, in front of 7 other children, that his kind didn't belong in this town. Some things about Douglas stayed unclear to Thomas. From somewhere far back, there was a Cherokee grandmother, never seen, just mentioned. His mother and father left Kentucky fast, quiet, carrying something heavy he couldn't name yet. In some places, people saw him as white, no questions. Elsewhere, his skin pulled glances that lingered too long. There he was again, frozen in the dirt lot behind the building, that tightness creeping up, not quite panic. Heavier than that, a slow understanding. Wherever they moved next, this exact quiet dread would follow. It always did. He did not fight Douglas Pratt. Home was where he headed on foot. In the kitchen, a chair held him still. Waiting filled the room until his mother returned from school. Into the room stepped Elara, eyes landing on her boy at the table. His palms pressed hard against the wooden surface, still and firm. That stubborn line of his mouth caught her breath. Suddenly it wasn't just a child's frown. It belonged to James. Same quiet fire. The kind that says nothing will shake me. Not now. Not ever. She sat across from him. "Tell me," she said. He told her. Her eyes stayed fixed while he spoke. After his last word, silence hung there like dust in sunlight. Then she said, "Thomas, look at me." He looked. "The people who say things like that," she said slowly, "are not more powerful than you. They only have more practice pretending to be. Do you understand the difference?" He thought about it. "No," he said honestly. "You will," she said. "It takes time, but you will." She reached across and covered his hands with hers. "You come from people who survived things that were supposed to destroy them," she said. "That's not nothing. That's everything." Part 4. What the 60s asked of them. 1961 to 1968. James Calloway was killed on a Tuesday morning in March of 1961. Just quiet. The folks out of Harlan County had wandered off, one way or another. Maybe they'd given up. Maybe they just forgot. Hate didn't drive it. Drama played no part. Meaning stayed far away. By accident. Wrong place, wrong time. James ended up caught between a loose rail and hard ground. Frost had cracked the wood days before. Nearby, a snake slid through dry grass, making a horse jump sideways fast. That snap of movement started it all. Death ruled an accident, official and cold. A man from the ranch showed up after sunset, standing quietly on the porch. The hat held tight in both hands. Voice low when he spoke. said things no one wants to hear, called James the finest worker he ever trusted. Sorrow sat heavy in his eyes. Elara thanked him. She closed the door. She stood in the hallway of her house for a very long time. A boy stood inside his bedroom. 12 winters lined his face. The rumble of tires on gravel reached him first, then murmured talk below, then her words, same rhythm, unmoved, too still to feel safe. At the edge of his door frame he paused, eyes fixed on hers. She turned to look at him. A glance moved from one to the other, nameless yet clear. Not words, but a shift. Everything settled differently after that. "Come here," she said. Across the hall he walked. Not like before, but now she pulled him close, just as when he could barely walk, arms tight, her cheek buried in his scalp. She did not cry. Not then. Not for 6 months. That night, near dawn, by herself on the worn step where James once watched the sky, her tears arrived. Not the quiet kind born of sorrow. These were deeper, rougher, rising slow from somewhere beneath loss itself. It was the sound of a woman who had outrun everything the world had thrown at her, and found, waiting for her at the finish line, the one loss she had never prepared for. She did not collapse. Women like Elara Calloway do not have the luxury of collapse. Working came first. Teaching followed close behind. Raising Thomas filled the quiet hours. Rent got covered each month without delay. Beneath the floorboard lived a tin box, hidden but always remembered. Into it went coins, then bills, piece by piece. Not much grew there, yet enough shifted over time. She did not name it safety. Instead, she called it choices, something missing during her own childhood in Harlan County. This gap shaped her. Now it drives what she builds for him. Thomas grew into someone remarkable. He had already become someone teachers noticed by age 16, though they could never quite explain why. Intelligence alone didn't cover it. More like a sharp clarity, an instinct for grasping how things fit together. Something many grown-ups never manage at all. Everything he read stuck. With his teachers came debate, never rude, yet never backing down either. His father's laugh lived in him, mixed with his mother's fixed mind and another trait all his own. The belief that pain around him wasn't normal, couldn't be called fate, didn't have to stay. Back in 1964, at age 15, news of the Civil Rights Act reached him. Pages spoke of Selma, quiet but sharp. Marches filled his thoughts, then images of water cannons, cold metal bars. Jail cells lingered longest in his mind. He came to his mother at the kitchen table, where she was grading papers by lamplight, and he put the newspaper down in front of her. "Why didn't you ever tell me it was this bad everywhere?" he asked. Her eyes moved to the paper. After that, they landed on his face. "I was hoping you'd have a little more time before you had to know," she said. "I'm 15. I know how old you are." Down he sat. Through the paper his eyes moved, stopping on photos, faces struck hard just for taking steps, simply being, speaking up. "I want to do something," he said. "I know you do. Will you let me?" She looked at her son for a long moment. Maybe it was the quiet that made her remember Dale Combs, his shadow long in the doorframe while he weighed a choice. Across a worn kitchen table, James had faced someone dangerous, yet spoke slow and steady like weather moving through. The memory came back, the gray stone wall near the post office. How letters hid in cracks between bricks like secrets waiting. "I will not stop you," she said finally. "But I need you to understand something first." "What?" "The people who fight for justice," she said quietly, "don't always get to see it. Sometimes all you get is the fighting. Sometimes the fighting is the whole thing." Crew. Thomas was quiet. "Is that enough?" she asked. "For you?" Wasn't just a quick idea. He sat with it, turned it around in his head. "Yes," he said. She nodded. "Then go," she said, "and be careful, and come home to me." Part 5. The Year Everything Broke. 1968. 1968 was the year America came apart at its seams. Martin Luther King Jr. shot dead in April in Memphis. Robert Kennedy shot dead in June in Los Angeles. The Democratic National Convention in Chicago, where police beat protesters in the streets while the whole country watched on television. Burning cities in Vietnam, fires everywhere, impossible to ignore. A feeling spreads, sickening, constant, that what broke can never fit back together. Thomas Calloway was 19 years old. That stretch of time found him tangled up in a tiny civil rights crew out of Albuquerque, shuttling neighbors to voting spots, nudging gatherings into shape, grinding through the quiet labor nobody applauds but everyone needs. One afternoon, he landed himself cuffed. Just for a short while, after stepping into a parade the city hadn't signed off on. 3 hours down the road, Elara showed up at the station, handed over cash for his release, and didn't toss even one sharp comment his way. In the spring of 1968, he met a girl named Rosalie Tso. Her roots ran deep in New Mexico, Navajo through and through. Her family had settled there longer than anyone could remember. At 20, she walked toward a nursing career, steady on her feet, clear in her words. Something about her gaze struck Thomas like an old memory, sharp and soft at once, just like his mother used to be. He fell in love with her the way his father had fallen in love with his mother. Quickly, completely, with no protection against it. They were together for 4 months before her family made their position clear. Just because he kept to himself didn't mean he held anything against Thomas. Out loud, her father made it clear he had no ill will toward the boy. Beliefs mattered to him, and the young man stood firm. The past shaped people, and he saw that too. Yet the Tso family carried stories all their own. Scars shaped by time, not anger. Because staying close meant safety. This choice came from endurance, not fear. Century after century of being treated like they did not belong. A weariness passed down, quiet but deep, from those who learned too well how hard it is to simply remain. "I am not your enemy," Rosalie's father said to Thomas, the one time they spoke directly. "But I cannot give you my blessing." Thomas drove home from that conversation and sat in his mother's kitchen. He still thought of it as his mother's kitchen, though he had his own apartment in Albuquerque, and said nothing for a long time. Steam curled from the mug Elara set down. She took her seat opposite, hands wrapping around warmth. "She loves me," Thomas said finally. "I know. And I love her." "I know that too." "Is that not supposed to be enough?" Elara looked at her son. A girl stood by the pump, 17, sleeves rolled up. Then there was the boy, a mark cut high on his forehead, like a question. Love wasn't some fix-all answer. Far from it, yet without it. None of the rest could even begin. It spun everything, whether noticed or not. "It is enough," she said carefully. "But it is not the only thing. Other people's pain is real too, Thomas. Even when it asks things of you that feel unbearable." Thomas was quiet. "What do I do?" he asked. And Elara, who had spent her entire life being told what to do, and had spent her entire adult life refusing it, said the truest thing she knew. "You decide what you can live with and you live with it. Rosalie Tso made her own decision. She chose Thomas. Still, her parents never cast her out. They weren't built that way. Yet something shifted. A quiet gap grew, thick as river mud left behind when waters receded. It stayed, fixed. Part of the ground now, like walking around a stone on the floor. They married in 1969. Elara stood in the small courthouse and watched her son marry this woman, this fierce, clear-eyed, magnificent woman, and felt something she had not felt in 8 years. James would have loved her, she thought. James would have loved all of this. Part 6. Where the Dust Remembers. 1971 and after. Elara Calloway died in October of 1971. She was 40 years old. That summer, cervical cancer showed up like it already knew the way. Doctors in Albuquerque listed what could be done. Each choice got turned over in her mind, slow and careful. What stuck was going to the little house in Cimarron where walls held more than just wood and nails. Time wasn't stretched out ahead, so she shaped it herself. Home became the answer, not treatment. Thomas and Rosalie. Nursing was what she did now, yet tending to herself brought both skill and sorrow, each weighing the same. In her last weeks, Elara was lucid more often than not. James came up in her words. Out of nowhere. Harlan County appeared too, green turned almost black. Sky hanging so close it seemed breakable. The tin box hidden beneath a loose board was mentioned next. She wanted Thomas to track it down, hold on to it, and carry that weight. Then silence. There it was. Inside, the lid lifted. Hidden below, the paper tying them together in ink and law. A record of when he first drew breath. The official note marking his father's last. 3 short lines from Dale Combs on thin stationery. Underneath it all, worn down by folding and time. So many folds the edges turned ghost-like. The stack of letters James sent her. Each single one. Thomas sat on the floor of his mother's bedroom and read them. It started with words on a page. Not sure where things are headed. One thing sits clear, though. If life moves forward, he wants her there beside it. He held the letters against his chest. He wept, not quietly, not with any particular dignity. The way grief that has been stored too long finally comes out, all at once, without warning, with a force that feels like the body reclaiming something it was owed. Elara in the bed heard him. She reached out her hand He took it. They stayed like that for a long time. In the afternoon light of a New Mexico autumn, the mountains visible through the window, the air smelling of sage and distance. Was it worth it? Thomas asked finally. All of it. Was it worth it? Elara thought about the question. Water pumped through her mind alongside crumpled paper tucked in drawers. A courthouse stood crooked in a place whose name she barely knew, its walls echoing quiet decisions. That pale blue dress hung loose around the shoulders like it was waiting for someone taller. Cities drifted by, Cincinnati, then Cimarron, one syllable clicking after another. A man once settled onto wooden steps behind his house, eyes lifted past rooftops into the open sky. The boy vanished slowly, replaced by a shape that didn't match any dream she'd carried. Years pass like footsteps on a long path. Running turns into breathless moments that fade too fast. Loss arrives without knocking one quiet morning. Staying feels heavier each time it chooses you instead of the other way around. Yes, she said. Just that. Just one word. And somehow, in the saying of it, everything was enough. Couvre. She died 3 days later, on a Sunday morning, while Thomas was making coffee in the kitchen, and Rosalie was reading in the chair by the window. They said afterward that she looked peaceful. People always say that. But Thomas, who knew his mother's face better than any other face in the world, believed it was true. She looked like a woman who had finished something, who had, at the end of a long and difficult road, arrived. Epilogue. What remains? A final word from the narrator. Harlan County still exists. Now most coal mines sit shut. Deep green stays on the hills, so thick in summer they turn near dark. Rivers keep their reddish tint, like old iron soaked too long. There is no marker for Elara May Combs, Calloway anywhere in that county. No one there remembers her name. But in a small house in Cimarron, New Mexico, there is a tin box. Papers filled the space. Among them, letters unfolded slowly. A man's hand wrote to a woman year after year. Distance never stopped him. Not time, not even death. These days, Thomas Calloway reaches for the box when things seem too heavy. He is past 60, yet some moments still pull him down. When life appears shattered, beyond fixing, that old container comes into view. He reads a letter. He thinks about his parents, two ordinary people who made extraordinary choices in an era that gave them very little room to make any choices at all. And he remembers what his mother told him at a kitchen table in 1964, when he was 15 years old, and furious and frightened and ready to walk into the fire of his generation. The people who fight for justice don't always get to see it. Sometimes all you get is the fighting. Sometimes the fighting is the whole thing. He folds the letter. He puts it back in the box. He goes on, because that is what you do. That is what they taught him. You go on. Where the Dust Remembers is an original work of fiction. All characters and events are fictional. Written exclusively for the Untold Memories channel. Memories stay hidden here. Every bit belongs to its owner. Nothing slips away without permission.